Hi, Rebecca, and welcome. I'm so pleased to have you joining me at my Your Way Global Women's Conference. Thank you for coming, and thank you so much for being a trooper and having me record you today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Oh, pleasure. No, let's just jump right in because I think a lot of people might be asking, oh, well, she's so young and beautiful and she's a director at Barclays for 16 years. Oh, what's her story? So can you just give us a little bit of a background, please, Rebecca?
Yeah, of course. I'm not that young to start with. And I've been a director for about 2 years now, just coming up to 2 years. So I've not been a director for the whole time there. So it's been quite a journey. I've been there for 16 years, as you mentioned, and prior to that went to university to study economics and business studies. So probably not too much of a deviation going into banking based on what I did at school.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say it was set in stone I'd go into banking. I joined after university to earn some money to go on holiday with the girls.
As you do.
As you do, yeah. And whilst I was doing that, found that I really enjoyed it and liked working with customers and in particular businesses, which is the part of the bank that I work with. And so 16 years later, I'm still doing it, albeit there's been a few roles in between that and where I am now.
Fantastic. And then you're a female in the corporate at the top of the corporate ladder, and that's such an example and an inspiration to other women, because some people seem to think that women don't get those breaks.
Yeah, I agree, and I think I was really lucky in the team that I joined in Barclays, in that there were other females around, albeit far fewer than there were males, and so there were some role models to look at, albeit I'm not sure I identified myself in any of the more senior females around, at the early stages of my career. But you're right. I mean, it's not a female dominated industry by any stretch of the imagination, and I'm pleased to say it's getting better. But I think, in terms of whether that held me back or not, I'm not sure it did. And sometimes, or not completely anyway, I think sometimes in terms of talking to customers, particularly when pitching for business or attending meetings where there's multiple other banks there, sometimes being the only female was actually an advantage, because I stood out by the virtue of the fact I just wasn't another person in a pinstripe suit. So I think there was some sort of horror stories in terms of customers perhaps not accepting me as a female, although potentially my age had something to do with that as well. But internally, whilst there weren't multiple other women doing this role, I definitely joined banking perhaps at the right time where that was starting to change, and there's definitely still more work to do, but yeah, it's great to be a part of that now and helping others in their journey as they look to move through the ranks.
Yes, no, incredible. And I can imagine that you probably have some advice to give a young woman, especially when now that you said that you realized being a female was an advantage. So about looking back at my book and talking about being able to be your authentic self. I know in our conversations where we talk, you do talk about that. That's something that, in fact, you share because I know you're passionate about authenticity.
Yeah, I think so. I first heard the concept of it probably about a year ago, and then reading it in your book just really cements what the way I think about it. So I think over the years, when I've looked at leaders in my organisation, I've never thought of doing a leadership role. I just didn't think it would be me. I couldn't recognise myself in other people, and not just being female, just in this sort of personalities. And I think when you talk about it in your book, but doing things your way has got to be the way that we try and promote people into more senior roles going forward. So
yes,
I think particularly a few years back, you would see females going into senior leadership roles, but their style was almost copying perhaps the male leaders that went before them. And I don't think we should be if we're going to do it, there needs to be diversity in terms of ethnicity and sexuality and male versus female, but there needs to be diversity in terms of personality as well. And I think what you speak about in your book is exactly that, in trying to go about things your way, and then that leads to greater diversity overall, regardless of which bracket you fit into in terms of minorities.
Yes, exactly. Because if everybody has the same personality, how are you going to stand out? How are people going to engage with you, and as opposed to the next person? So to be honest, when you mentioned, because we've had conversations, and you mentioned about, you realizing the whole thing about also the uniqueness and personality, I thought, yes, not many people actually grasp that. So that's just incredible. Now, Rebecca, I know you've had a lot of wins, obviously, because you're in a very high position. But have you had any real moment where you felt, gosh, I can't believe I've actually gone and lost this, or I can't believe I'm facing this challenge?
Yeah, I think my biggest problem is trying not to take things personally. So if I've lost an account or lost a deal or a transaction that I'm working on, it's really hard not to take that personally, and that's perhaps my personality, and I think it's perhaps a feminine trait more than a masculine trait. But I take that quite hard and will think about it for a really long time. And I think that the longer I've been in banking, the more I've realised that there's so many things outside your control. It certainly doesn't always come down to me as the individual. There's other things that are at play when you're trying to pitch for a business.
Yes.
And so it's just trying to deal with that is probably be my biggest challenge coming throughout my career, and not dwelling on it, learning from it, obviously, and seeing if there are things you can change. But these things are not nobody, you don't lose a deal because somebody's thought, oh, I don't fancy banking with her, generally. So it's
exactly. It's not personal.
No, it's not. And it does work the other way. I mean, I don't think there are, in order to work with somebody else, regardless of what that is, whatever the supplier is, then you'd have to buy into the people that you're dealing with. But I think when you don't win a piece of business, it's generally because there's multiple things at play, as opposed to any sort of individual personalities.
Exactly.
So yeah, I'd say my biggest challenge has probably been myself over the years.
Yes, it's giving yourself permission, giving yourself a break and permission to not get it right all the time. And when you're great high achievers, we all struggle with that. So it's really refreshing that you're sharing that to the audience.
Yeah, and I think with the work that you're doing and the work that you do with your clients and others, I think it's far more acceptable to be open about these things now than it felt like it was maybe 10 years ago. And whether that's because I'm more confident now because I've been around for a bit longer and I feel like I've earned the right to be able to say these things or not, I don't know. But I think it's for me, I think it's fantastic that we're having these sorts of debates for the people coming behind us and making their paths maybe a little bit smoother.
Yes, exactly. And when you look at the complement of speakers that we have here from diverse sectors and all winning and doing it their way, it's just absolutely incredible. And I was so pleased that you agreed to come and share, because it's because it means so much to you, and that just gives so much credit to who you are as a person, Rebecca. But what would you tell your young self now that you're looking back?
Yeah, I mean, it would definitely just to go for it. I fall into the camp of into the segment of people that would only go for a promotion when I knew I could absolutely do the next job. In fact, I think the first 2 or 3 promotions, I acted up into the next role on a sort of temporary basis before applying for it. And that's great because you get wonderful experience without actually having the responsibility of being in charge of that set of customers or whatever it might be. But I waited too long at times between promotions, particularly the last one, to get to the director grade. because if there was 10 things on the list and I couldn't do one of them, I thought that maybe it wasn't for me. And, you know, I know that's talked about a lot in terms of career progression, particularly for females. I was definitely in that camp, and still am now in terms of the next progression. But you know, the thing that I would tell my younger self would be just to go for it and surround myself with the people who can teach me how to do things.
Oh, that's another thing that's in the book, about surrounding yourself with the right people. Beware the dream killers.
Indeed. Well, we can't all be good at everything, can we? You know, it's
exactly. You definitely read the book, because that is it. You know, you cannot be good at everything. So what you got to do is find the people who are good at what you're not good at, get them to do that bit so you can focus on the good that you do. And I'm sure, because you have teams that you have to oversee. So, you know, you could, you know, share so much about how to inspire teams. Give us a little bit of that. How would you say from today, one of the key things to inspire your teams?
I think, I mean, I work with multiple people. So anything that I'm working on at any one time, there will be 5 to 10 other people contributing to what's going on, and some of those will be half a mile from me in Cardiff, and some of them are in India. And other places around the world. So I think it's different depending on who I'm interacting with, because clearly it's far easier in normal times when I'm talking to people in the same office as me than it is somebody halfway across the world in a different time zone. But, you know, I think the way I tend to do it is try to lead by example. So I think I work hard, and I'm reasonably organised, so we're not trying to do things at the very last minute in terms of delivering projects and deadlines and things. I'm probably a control freak, and in fact I know I'm a control freak. I
think that's one of the problems with leaders.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I do like things done my way as well, which is particularly difficult, and something I've had to learn to let go of over time. But yeah, in terms of inspiring other people to do things, then I think you've got to sort of bring the message back to what we're trying to deliver. So if we are, you know, inevitably in my role, it's delivering something for a customer, and you know, that's very easy to see because, you know, they're living, breathing businesses, and it's easy to talk to people about what this means for that business and what we can do to help them. And at the moment, you know, that's as real as ever because of COVID and the rest of it. So most of what we're doing is trying to make sure that businesses can keep going through to next year. And so, yeah, I suppose leading by example, I think, is important, and that's what gets me inspired when I'm looking at, you know, my leadership is, you know, seeing people do things, you know, in an authentic way, as we've said, with a bit of purpose as well.
Yes. Definitely. Oh my goodness, there's so much. You know, guys, I know you probably just can't wait to you have all the questions now for Rebecca. But you know, Rebecca, just one last thing. Could if we went away today remembering one thing, what would be that one thing you'd like us to remember that you have shared with us?
I know this is the theme of the book, but I'm not trying to be teacher's pet, but it is the one thing that has really helped me over the last the last couple of years is just remembering to not doubt yourself just because you're doing things slightly different to somebody else or people who've gone before you. So make sure you stick with the way that you want to do it. And, you know, as we said earlier, you have got to take advice, and there are certain norms and rules that we need to engage in, particularly when you're working in a regulated bank. But I think it's really important to do it as you feel you should do it, and particularly when it's in terms of leading a team. And yeah, I think that would be my biggest takeaway, and the thing that's helped me the most, and something that I've come to very late in my career.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, guys. Hasn't she been absolutely incredible? Thank you so much, Rebecca. Come on now, guys. I know you are full of questions for her, so over to you. Okay, all the best, Rebecca. They're going to be coming at you now.